Welcome, everyone. We are going to be waiting until Rabbi Yosef Shapiro comes and joins us. Glad you're joining today. We are waiting for Rabbi Shapiro to join us, and there he is. We did it.
Hello, how are you?
I'm great. How are you doing?
Good. Thank you for doing this.
Thank you for doing this. I know I see some people joining us right now. We're just going to get into it and get started. And we're really, really grateful and excited to talk to you today. We are going to be talking about the new book that Rabbi Shapiro wrote himself called In It Together, A Candid View of Infertility. A little bit of background about this special man who's sitting in front of us today. Rabbi Yosef Shapiro grew up in Baltimore, learned in different yeshivot, while also completing his MBA in investment banking. I don't think you hear that a lot. He received smicha from Jerusalem Kollel under the leadership of Rabbi Yitzchak Berkovitz, and is now senior rabbi of the Brookhaven Kollel, right around the corner from us in Atlanta, a Kiruv outreach organization that he and his wife, Rookie, who we're going to hear a little bit more about later, started from scratch, and it now services hundreds of young Jews in our community. So we're going to, again, get in deeper, but basically Rabbi Yosef Shapiro has shared the personal struggle that he and his wife, Rookie, went through in order to grow their family. And his new book is a powerful story. It really, really, truly is, that offers information, hope, encouragement for those on a similar journey. So it's not only about outlining the steps that both Rookie and you went through. I think one of the things that I'd like to start us off with is that there are lots of emotions and feelings that I left with when reading this book. And I think as somebody who also went through infertility, a few of the things that really not only impressed me, but really reminded me of what I went through is just how raw and vulnerable and honest you were. And I think that as a man and as somebody in the rabbinic community, I don't see it a lot. I don't hear it a lot. And I appreciate that. So thank you. A few things that really stood out to me, just a few comments, are, again, the raw and vulnerable, crying out for the fear of your future. Some of these key points throughout the book were really positive, that you felt virtually numbed by the intensity of your pain. Yeah, right? Resonated with me, and I'm sure a lot of other folks in our community. My favorite, just relax and conceive, right? So I thought, as the only one going through this, I thought I only heard that, but it's nice to hear that we aren't alone in hearing that. The feelings that come back with getting a negative test after a long infertility journey, especially when nothing's wrong with you or your body. And then another point that was like a moment of joy after so many tears of crying throughout your book was the pure joy and shock that I felt when Rookie sent you that ultrasound of baby A and B. And that's something that I remember also from, working with you and hearing your story. But okay, enough about me. I'm super impressed and super excited to talk to you. So first of all, who are you? How did you get connected to JFF? Why are you talking to us on Instagram Live today?
Excellent. So thank you for having me. So the basic background is that we had started our journey in Israel. Interestingly enough, we actually had our first child without any issues, and therefore we were even more lulled into that sense of, oh, this is going to be easy. We'll have as many kids as we want when we want, and it'll be great. And then pretty quickly we learned that that's not necessarily how life is going to go. And we struggled in the system in Israel, which I know Alana, you that world too, where the system is a socialized medical system, and obviously the benefit is we weren't paying anything because the government was covering all the costs, but because of that, they also were dragging their feet to do as minimal as possible so that they don't have to pay for anything too invasive. So when we moved to Atlanta, which was about almost 6 years ago, after already having been through about a year of treatment, decisions and procedures and diagnostic tests that need to be done. So the two ways we ended up getting connected with Alana with the JFF were that first of all we were trying to figure out which clinic we wanted to go to, because thankfully Atlanta has many and each clinic has their benefits and their cons, and obviously part of the process is trying to figure out one where you can feel comfortable, and also figuring out how do we make all this work financially. So did a little research, and everyone told me there's this new organization that's just starting, and it's called the Jewish Fertility Foundation. You have to reach out to them. They'll know what you need to do. So called up Alana, had no idea who she was or what this organization was, but incredibly within like 24 hours, I had phone numbers for multiple people who had been through fertility treatments in the clinic we were leaning towards. And in addition to having that benefit from JFF, which obviously was very helpful in solidifying our decision that that was the clinic we were going to use after hearing from other people what their experiences had been, we also were probably one of the first grant receivers, if I had to guess, because this was almost 6 years ago.
Yep.
And we received the grant, which obviously was a big piece of how we were able to somewhat calmly go through the financial piece of this journey. So that's really how we started. And then I'm incredibly grateful to JFF that subsequently they have given me incredible opportunities to present to medical facilities. They've guided some of their clients who want to know halachic information. They've sent to me. And through this connection, both Rookie and I have felt that we were able to take our journey and really use it to benefit others. So yes, I think that should answer how we got started with JFF.
Yeah, and we feel the same way about you. We're really grateful that we have this resource. Not only did you go through the journey or have gone through the journey, but you also are now paying it forward and really helping us to educate our doctors and our nurses and our admin teams at the fertility clinics around special needs of Jewish clients. And also, we get calls all the time from different individuals seeking halachic advice. And you're definitely, on my list to refer clients. So thank you, thank you, thank you. So let's dig a little deeper. In the introduction of your book, you talk a lot about shame, inadequacy, embarrassment. Where were you, in your early days? You and Rookie, if you can speak for her as well. Where were you, and then where are you today, and how did you get to that point?
Just to clarify, you mean as far as our general mentality?
So I think like you talked about being embarrassed. I think, which many of us who have experienced or do experience infertility, it's really embarrassing. It's something private and personal, but also like, were you embarrassed? Did you go through that moment of feeling shame and embarrassment yourself when you first
Yeah, so I'm not sure. Did I write embarrassed? If I wrote it, I'll stick to that. I'm not sure if that's the word I used.
embarrassed? You wrote a shame
Yeah,
and
yeah, more the inadequacy. The
okay.
fact that in life we sort of take for granted the ability to do certain things and produce certain results, and when a person finds themselves unable to provide the results they had always hoped for, then yes, there's definitely a sense of shame and inadequacy. The greatest thing that we found as a couple to combat that was finding how common it was. So obviously that's a big step. It takes a lot of courage to get to that point. But once we were able to say, you know what, we're going to start reaching out to people who there's enough evidence that they may be going through this. So we'll put ourselves out there. Hey, we are going through IVF. Are you also?
Mm-hmm.
And we had some interesting reactions. Almost everyone was indeed going through it. Some people, though, interestingly enough, said we are, but at least one person said we are, but my spouse doesn't let me talk about it to other people. So that was understanding. Some people said no, we actually are not. Most overwhelming majority of them were. And through that, we sort of created our own like mini support group where we just had friends and we were sharing what we're going through and they were sharing what they were going through. And that opened that conversation to really make it that now it was no longer that we're inadequate, it's that we're struggling with something. And some people struggle with finances, and some people struggle with mental health, and some people struggle with infertility. And that allowed us at least to combat that issue specifically of how we felt internally about ourselves.
That's helpful. I have so many more questions. So I think also one of the things that I love asking couples, and normally I'm talking with the women, right? So a lot of times women are much more open, sharing of their emotional side, their journey. I do encounter some men that are also willing to share. What was it like with your wife? Like, was it hard? Were you always on the same page? Were you always in agreement of both being open with your friends, family, but also like treatment side? Were you always on the same page in terms of like the next steps in terms of treatment?
Yes, that's a good question. So first of all, we happen to have, yes, been on the same page, but from my vantage point as a congregational rabbi, I know that's not common. Very, very often we have congregants who approach us that they're going through IVF, and one of the key things I try to work through with them is the way it impacts a marriage. But I do mention in the book that one of the major differences between the way we went through the treatment was that I was the type of person who wanted to know every minute detail of every possible thing that could come up. And Rookie much preferred just do what you're doing, don't tell me what it is, and like I'll deal with it as it happens. Which was fine because that wasn't something that had any impact on how either of us processed it. I read every book on the subject. She didn't read any books on the subject. It happens to be, it was a very manageable type of difference. But yes, ultimately, we were on the same page as far as how we wanted to do things. We obviously, one of the big things for us was whenever we weren't sure, we had rabbis who we fully trusted together. So whichever decision they went, whether it was more in line with what I wanted to do next or what she wanted to do next, we were going to follow that guidance. And we don't take for granted, though, that yes, we were somewhat unique in that we were both on the same page in how we were going through it practically. But of course, there was that unique way of getting through each step. Did we want to know what was going on, or just do it? I don't want to know what's happening.
Yeah, I think that's really important. I remember my strategy was always like trusting the doctor and moving forward, just like pressing forward. And my husband was always like, okay, how are we going to pay for it? Like I wasn't even thinking about the finances. He was so focused on always the finances. And I'm like, what do you mean? We have to do this. We're doing it. We're moving forward. And it definitely caused conflict. I'm glad you had a rabbinic figure to go to. We used a therapist. I always encourage that. I think it's really important. Did you see your rabbi that you went to as like a mental health approach, spiritual? Was he able to talk to you about the medical side of it? What was it like for you guys?
Yeah, so it was more the spiritual, but the medical as well. We obviously found rabbis who we knew were also well versed in the medical needs and how they play out in Jewish law and what they have seen lead to the best outcomes for the couple, not necessarily the best likelihood of pregnancy, but the best likelihood for a happy family environment. And for us, that was enough that it provided inherently that mental health support.
And
So
and now I see you as somebody like that. Would you?
I hope I'm far from as wise as the rabbis who I consult with, but I hope that I can be that type of figure in couples' lives.
I think so. And I think what's great also about, the work that you're doing is you have access to so many individuals to get information if you don't know it or if you have a question or something like that. I think that that's really, really, really important. One of the areas you spoke about also is that, especially coming from a frum or a community, sisters and brothers are going to start having babies, and you're going to be surrounded a lot by family who might not always be sensitive to what you're going through. How did you guys work with your families or be with your families while you were going through this?
Yeah, so for us personally, that was the toughest part of it all. Thankfully, we have a lot of siblings and a lot of nephews and nieces. actually a lot of nephews, not so many nieces. But yes, that was definitely the toughest part of our journey as far as how we personally were impacted. And a lot of it has to do with making sure that the couple is on the same page, that we both understood, Brookie and I, when we were going to say, okay, we can't come to this thing, or we're going to come, but we may have to leave early, or we have to see if we can make it. I think my mother is watching. I think I saw her name, but she'll remember my sister's bat mitzvah almost ended up being the weekend of a transfer. And for anyone who's watching who doesn't know exactly what that means, that basically means thousands of dollars have already been spent, and you can either give it up and just wait another month, or maybe 2 months or 3 months, depending on how things progress medically, or you can say, you know what, I've got to do this. And thankfully, in the end, it did not end up being that weekend, but we spent a significant amount of time figuring out, what are we going to do? Are we, if we miss it, are we going to explain to them why? It's pretty strange to miss your sister's bat mitzvah without a reason. So are we going to tell people? And then what about the other people who aren't our siblings when they ask, oh, where are they?
Right.
Oh, they just didn't come to their sister's bat mitzvah. So yes, that is something very complicated, both as far as deciding to go. And then the second piece is, yes, when you are there, when you're at the siblings' family event because they had a baby, how do you get through it? One of the most important things is really just to make sure that your spouse or whoever your support system is a powerful part of your life, whether it's friends who are there for each other. So, yes, I'm going to text that friend, you know what, we're having a tough time. It's really difficult. We're going to this thing, whatever it is, a bris, because our sister just had another kid and we're so happy, but it's so tough to be there. Ultimately, I think that the most important thing is them being aware of how significant what you're going through is. But that being said, you have to know each sibling. Some siblings you can share information with and they can respond sensitively, and some people not. So one of the most significant goals I hope to accomplish with this book is that it allows somewhat nonchalantly for people who are associating with those going through infertility to maybe appreciate what is really going on in their sibling's life, because many people mistakenly think it's a difficult thing. It's like when a person has the flu and they're just not feeling well, and they don't realize that it's a total way of taking over your life. And I'm hoping that with this book, now people who don't know anything about the world of infertility will learn what's actually going on. And I hope that when they appreciate and see what is really going on, that it'll inherently lead them to be more sensitive.
So theoretically, if you're a individual experiencing infertility, a good present for a sibling.
Right. Or maybe encourage your parent to get it for the siblings.
I think so. I think you don't have to be experiencing infertility to appreciate this book, or you don't have to be a veteran of infertility to appreciate it. I think there's a lot of detail in there that explains the emotion, like what you were saying, the complete control that infertility has when you're trying to have a child and how it impacts your life. I also really liked, you spoke a lot about you had a child and you experienced secondary infertility and comments, that were made by well-intending individuals. What are some of your favorite comments? Like, you already have
favorite means the ones that I would list as most unique.
Yeah.
The ones that were most surprising were the ones that tried making it like, oh, you already have a child, you know how difficult they are anyways, or stuff like that. That would imply almost like from the fact that we already know that children are difficult. And I don't disagree. There are challenges with having children. But when someone is trying to invest every single ounce of everything in their life into having children, they don't need to know how difficult children will be. They're fine with that. They'll take that.
Right. Or at least you can get pregnant, or at least you
at least you have one.
So I always used to get, like, I had 2 through treatments, also free in Israel. But then I remember for 5 years trying to have another child. Even my own loving family, who also might be on here, even my husband was like, why can't you just focus on the 2 that you have? Why can't you just love them, be with Of course I love them. Of course I want to be with them. I know I have more to offer and I will do everything in my power to get there. And yeah, it's really hard to already have that child and know you're not done and know you have more to, to offer. It's hard.
Definitely.
It's bringing back feelings and emotions. It wasn't just a good read. It really was relatable. So tell me a little bit more about really, what are some of the hurdles that you accomplished in writing this book or you overcame in writing this book?
So that's a great question. So first of all, the biggest question we had when we started the process of writing the book was if we were going to do it anonymous or not. Because obviously there's a lot of information there that is not your typical book that you share with other people. But on the flip side, one of the biggest goals with this book is to allow people to feel comfortable sharing their story. And if I were to make the book anonymous, then that sort of defeats the whole purpose, because then everyone says, okay, yeah, now we have the information, but obviously it's still too significant to share what you're going through personally. It actually was a long conversation, several months with different rabbis and different people who I consider mentors. But ultimately, the decision we reached was that the goal of allowing people to feel like I can be the same as everyone else and I'm just going through infertility and there's nothing wrong with sharing it with others would trump the personal discomfort, hesitancy, whatever you want to call it. And that therefore we did decide to go through it with our names on the front cover. But so that was the first step. Another major hurdle was in the publishing world. So obviously there are the big publishing world. I knew I wanted to go through it from the Jewish perspective
Okay.
because a lot of what I share is Jewish perspectives of how to go through the challenge, Jewish perspectives of why this is happening, or what we could see from it, or what we can gain from going through something like that. But in the flip side, a lot of the Jewish organizations have many diverse opinions from their rabbinic teams about who is allowed to do which things, what's allowed, and when it's allowed. That was a big hurdle, trying to figure out which publisher would be willing to take the book. Ultimately, in an interesting turn of events, Feldheim, which originally was not sure if they were, ultimately did decide after we had already put together the manuscript. So it did end up working out exactly the way we would have hoped. But yes, there were a lot of hurdles going through it. Also, in general, for anyone who ever writes a book about their personal life and then you send it to an editor, so anytime they question any of the content, it's like they're questioning how you view your own life. So it was a very interesting experience, to say the least, going through the process. But ultimately, my writing skills were not great, but the content was pretty good. And with the use of editors and actually being willing to be challenged, I acknowledge that the book is far better than it would have been without that.
Amazing. Was there anything that you kept out of the book? You don't have to
Yeah.
tell me it.
Yes.
Like two
Yes.
projects you
Yeah.
were.
There are, obviously, we wanted to provide the maximum amount of information we could that we thought was actionable. So all types of issues, and I'll give one example that actually was interesting because it was a big back and forth with the editor. But any information that we thought would help people, we decided to share, meaning something that's actionable, not just like, oh, did you put in an embryo that was male or female? It doesn't make any difference to a reader. That you can decide what you want to do with whoever you counsel with. But as far as any information that we thought people would say, oh, you know what? I hadn't thought of that. That's good information to know. Basically anything on that realm we put in. Now, obviously there's a spectrum of how to do it in a sensitive way. And I did have two of probably the biggest rabbis in the world, at least in my opinion, read the entire manuscript.
Right.
And one of them made me change individual words because of sensitivity. So I did want to be very careful that it would be very sensitive, but all the content that I thought would help, I did include. One of the things we did not include, which the editor wanted us to, but I was very firm I was not going to, was after our first retrieval, we do not share how many eggs we got. And the editor was back and forth, like, you've shared so much, why don't you just let the readers know? And I said, listen, it doesn't matter. There is zero difference to a reader knowing how many eggs were retrieved or not, whether it was 1 or 10 or 100 or 500, doesn't matter. So that's where we sort of drew the line. Things that were part of our personal life that didn't make any difference for people reading it, that was sort of where we drew the line, that, you know what, that's enough.
Was it you didn't want to make somebody else feel bad that maybe they didn't get as many, or what was the reason specifically around that one?
It wasn't necessarily such a, we have concerns about this, we are therefore gonna not put it in print. Okay. It was more that in general the topic is more private, so we felt that there's no reason to share things that are not something that will make any difference to the reader.
Makes sense. Got it. Interesting. And is this your first book?
This is my first book, yeah.
Interesting. So tell us a little bit more about, as we're wrapping up, what really are you hoping to accomplish with this book? And, if you can leave some final thoughts to our audience here about why they should read it and what it'll tell them and where they're going to go with it.
Yeah, so there are several goals of this book. Number one is that somebody who is going through infertility, I hope that this book allows them to really understand what they're about to go through. Because it's one thing to Google infertility treatment, which I don't recommend, by the way. I've done it, but I don't recommend.
Gosh.
Because you will learn everything without any filtering, and it's overwhelming and often not going to be the case for any specific individual. Mm-hmm. But very often we don't really know what you are getting through, meaning that there's going to be injections and there's going to be hormone control and things like that. But at the end of the day, what does that actually mean in your life? What is going to actually happen? And that is something that we did not find when I searched for literally every book on the topic I looked for. And that was the main reason I wrote the book, was with that intention in mind, that somebody who's going through infertility treatment, they should actually be able to know what they're going through, so that they don't feel like us, where it's constantly, okay, I don't know what's going to happen. We're going to go to this appointment, and I don't know what's next. Maybe it'll be A, B, C, I don't know. So maybe they'll actually have a blueprint of someone's actual life and how their life was impacted through their journey. Another reason is for the people who are associating with those who are going through infertility treatment to know how to support them and what is appreciated and what is not appreciated. And then number 3 and number 4, which are much broader pictures, and which is why it's really something that I hope everyone will read, regardless of if they know anyone going through IVF or not, is that last piece, which is that a lot of people don't realize how significant infertility treatment is. And like I said before, they think it's almost like, oh, my kid's home with a cold. Oh, that's so sad. Oh, and I'm going through IVF. Oh, that's so sad. And they don't realize that there's a drastic difference between the type of suffering that occurs from someone who has a cold, someone whose kid's home from school, or someone who's going through IVF, and their entire life for years is taken over. So create a general
absolutely
sensitivity, awareness of what's going on, and which is also universal message, is that as the book mentions, one of the things that was unique is that our doctor was adamant he was not putting in more than one embryo.
This is my favorite.
He said, if you want twins, find another clinic, use me, you're not having twins. He put in one embryo and it split, and we ended up with identical twins. And the message that showed us about how so much in life we have this pressure, this is how things are going to work, and this is what I want to happen. And then sometimes God says to us, listen, you can do all you want. You can say everything you're doing. If I want your life to work out a certain way, it's going to happen no matter what. So your doctor says you're not having twins, you're only putting one in, no problem. I'll split that embryo. You'll have twins anyways. And that universal message of understanding of the idea that, you know what, instead of getting caught up in, I am going to make sure this is how my life works out. But you know what? No, I'm going to appreciate that there's a plan. I may not understand it. I may not know why it has to work out that way. But there is a plan, and God has something, and God is able to do anything. We both know, I know personally, both myself and people who the doctor said they aren't having children, and they had children. So at the end of the day, it's such an important message for anyone going through any challenge, regardless of what the specifics are, to recognize that message that we were very fortunate to see firsthand, that God is going to run the show, God is going to take care of us, maybe not in the way that we had planned, but in a way that hopefully we can ultimately understand and appreciate. That was the main reason. I did see someone mention how to get the book. So, Ilana, are you able to post the link after?
Absolutely. We will.
Send it to you.
Feldheim.com, right?
Yes, and for anyone who's local in Atlanta, I will be receiving the books in approximately a week and a half, and we'll be selling them from my home as well, but it's probably easier to just order it online.
Amazing. So feldheim.com. Last question, and then I promise to let you go, is so you're an Orthodox rabbi. A lot of our audience comes from all different backgrounds, Jewish, non-Jewish. What would you say? Is this book still relevant to them?
That's a good question. First of all, interestingly enough, yes, I'm an Orthodox rabbi. My congregation, though, of about 700 people is a non-Orthodox congregation because I work in the outreach world. We purposely tried, when I say we, I refer to myself and the publisher, we tried to make sure that anyone with any background would be able to understand all the messages. So yes, I think it is. I myself am curious if they'll appreciate some of the more religious messages that we gained from. Mm-hmm. But as far as benefiting and being able to understand everything, yes, I'm confident that anyone with any background will be able to understand the messaging and the information. As far as if they appreciate and if the religious message will resonate with them, I'm curious to know myself. I hope they would let me know.
Stay tuned. We'll give you some answers. Thank you so much for your time today. I'm really happy that this book is out. I'm happy that you're a part of the Jewish Fertility Foundation community. Rookie, shout out to you. I see you're here also. And to be continued. So thank you for your time, everyone. Have a great day. We will talk to you.
Thank you so much. Have a good day.
Bye-bye.